Now, Britain should care about the Irish economy because, as the Prime Minister put it today, we export more to Ireland than to India, China, Brazil and Russia combined. And Ireland's troubles, a banking crisis plus a degree of political shakiness, could have a domino effect if they also cause problems for Portugal, Greece and Spain, and in fact the entire Eurozone. Well, that's the reason the Euro finance ministers are meeting in Brussels, and our economics editor Paul Mason is there. Paul.
Gavin, tonight there is no official request for a bailout from Ireland, nor is there an official bailout underway. But they have had to admit that the Irish banks are in bigger trouble than they previously admitted. And as a result, what there is this, I'll quote it, a short, focused consultation over the best way to avoid market risks. That's going ahead in Dublin in the next few days. What that means is that Ireland is being pushed down the route of some kind of bailout of its banks at least. Now, the fascinating part of this is the news from two credible news organisations that we, the Brits, are to be involved in some way bilaterally with Ireland. So British taxpayers' money may end up propping up an Irish bank or even the Irish government. Now, the British government wouldn't deny this. It just said it had been no request had been made. So it is really all in flux tonight, as I've been finding out. In Brussels tonight, the finance ministers of the Eurozone had to scramble once again to save the euro. For the Irish finance minister, facing a sell-off of the country's debt and ultimatums from the rest of Europe, one question. How much chaos are you going to inflict on the European Union before you take the bailout? And from the President of Europe, a frank admission.
We were in the survival mode. And it is not over. If you have a closer look to the papers this morning, it is not over yet. And so we entered in a survival period. We have all worked together in order to survive with the Eurozone, because if we don't survive with the Eurozone, we will not survive with the European Union.
Meanwhile, in Dublin, the Fianna Fáil coalition had spent 48 hours delaying the inevitable. A bailout from a €750 billion fund designed to help countries in this state. Prime Minister Brian Cowen insistent to the last.
This country has not applied to enter a facility. We made the point, as we've been making it, that we are pre-funded up to mid-2011. There has been, as people also know, a continuing problem in relation to underpinning banking and financial stability within the euro area generally, and the peripheral countries, including Ireland, because of the size of our deficit and other issues, and indeed the banking issues, have had to deal with those situations. And all of the initiatives that we've taken, and all of the policy initiatives we have been taking, have been done with the consent and approval of the European Union institutions.
So how did we get here? In October 2008, as the world reacted to the collapse of Lehman Brothers, Ireland became the first state in Europe to guarantee its banking system. The problem was Irish banks were carrying massive bad debt. In March, the government announced it would guarantee €81 billion of loans from these stricken banks. A further €34 billion would be needed to bail out the nationalised Anglo-Irish Bank. As a result, Ireland was forced to double its austerity measures, cutting $15 billion over the next 4 years. But the pain may not be over. As finance ministers arrived here, they were determined to impose strict conditions on any deal. The Dutch insistent that Europe effectively takes control of any country seeking help.
It's not a bailout because the pricing and the conditionality is quite harsh. It's very difficult to apply for this mechanism, for the guarantees and for a loan. So that's why I persist that we have to do it this way, with all the conditionality, with all the pricing. Very
that way or not, that way or nothing.
That way, and together with the IMF or nothing. Yeah.
The problem is, this is the easy bit, the controllable bit of horse trading between nations. But out there is the uncontrollable bit, the bond market. The bondholders know they stand to lose billions if the EU begins to allow controlled defaults by the countries in trouble. And as soon as the crisis is resolved over Ireland, they will turn to Portugal and to Spain until the EU comes up with some credible resolution of its bad debt problems.
Paul, so just to be clear tonight, where are we on all this? Is the EU actually in the process of bailing out Ireland?
Well, what's going on behind me in this building is a form of war by other means. It's economic conflict because the Germans, look, we already know that the Germans and the French and Northern Europe in general is going to bail out Southern Europe and Ireland, and that they're going to do it in order to protect themselves and to guarantee stability for the Eurozone. But the price they have to exact because of their own electorates is high. They have to make the conditions of any bailout individually very harsh and seen to be harsh, and then they have to consolidate that harshness, if you like, in the form of a new version of the Lisbon Treaty that really solidifies Europe's rules. Now, the Irish, in turn, just have to resist this because they don't believe that there's any imminent sovereign debt crisis. What there is, and they know it better than we do, is a kind of silent wholesale run on the Irish banking sector because people are pulling money out of it, not savers, but the people who fund it on a day-to-day basis. So they are haggling, and they're haggling over the terms, but it looks to me like the European Union and the ECB and the IMF are winning because they have forced them down the route of admitting that the banks are in more trouble than they previously said. So they are going to make them do something, but the Irish government is, as you saw there in the Irish Parliament, the Dáil, fighting tooth and nail to avoid this being done on the same basis as happened with Greece. They just don't believe they're in as bad shape as Greece. The problem is the markets do.
Well, I suppose the plain person's question is, what does the European Union have to do to settle the bond markets?
Well, the bond market, who is the bond market? The bond market are, investors who represent people like you and me and our pension funds and people all over Europe and the world's pension funds. And they don't want to have to write to us and say, hey, we lost some of your money by lending to Ireland. Now, I've just sat through a press conference where 3 senior EU bureaucrats and representatives have said categorically nobody in the private sector, no bondholder will lose money from Ireland, Greece or Portugal. But the problem is the bond markets just don't believe that. The cost of Irish debt, Portuguese debt, is high. And it will be higher tomorrow, I predict, because they don't believe it. The reason is they just don't, they know that tomorrow another set of politicians could turn up and say, you know what, we were wrong. Events intervened. And what kind of events? Well, we know we had a student riot and demonstration in London. There was also one in Dublin. And when the bond market sees a disturbance, it doesn't worry whether they are real students or anarchists. It just sees trouble on the streets. And they think, you know what, we're not so sure the austerity measures passed by these governments are going to be put through. That's why the bond markets do this, why they stage these almost panic-stricken runs on sovereign debt, and we really are in the middle of one. I think nothing that was said tonight will stop the bond market tomorrow looking at the situation going, it is not resolved. What they want is clarity. And even though the Irish government wants it all to be focused on banks, it's hard to see how the Europeans could sign up for that, because you can't have the ECB, a transnational organisation, bailing out the banks of a country whose government can't bail them out. That's just unprecedented.
Paul, thanks very much for joining us from Brussels. Well, I'm joined now from Dublin by the Irish Minister for Europe, Dick Roche. Mr Roche, can you tell us what kind of bailout or agreement or deal you are actually looking for in Brussels tonight?
I think the first thing that I have to say is just Paul, when he was talking about the bond markets and rationality, I think he's correct. They haven't been operating particularly rational. No matter what is said, that happens to be a given. Now, what we have already been doing here in Ireland is we've been making extraordinary adjustments particularly in our spending. We've taken the best part of 15 billion out of our budgets. We have a further 6 billion which is front-loaded for the budget which comes up in the early part of December. And what's interesting tonight is that the European Union ministers have actually endorsed what we're doing. They welcome the fact that we have a 4-year plan coming to deal with the period up to 2014. They welcome the plan that we have agreed and we have committed ourselves to taking 6 further billion out in the budget, in budget 2011. Because when we actually get to the end of the budget in 2011, the end of the budget year in 2011, we will be 2/3 of the way to reaching the adjustment that is necessary.
But they agree that you're doing the right thing, but it's not, as you said right at the start of this, it's not pacified the bond markets whether they're irrational or not.
It has not, and you're quite right. So that's where it goes. That's, I think, what has triggered the decision tonight, because the final paragraph of the communique makes it clear that what there is, the attempt will now be for the ministers to sit down with Ireland and with the institutions to work out a set of measures that will actually give the assurances to the market that the market needs. There's no point in our complaining about rationality or the lack of rationality in the markets. What we have to do is put together a construct now that shows the markets, A, that Ireland is more than serious because we have achieved what we set out to achieve, but B, that Europe itself is committed to protecting the Eurozone. So there's a bigger issue. There's a bigger issue than just the Irish budget. Yes.
Well, we'll get on to, I just wanted to put a specific point to you. Tomorrow's front page of the Financial Times in London says Osborne considers billions in Irish loans. Is there the possibility as part of this, a bilateral loan from the British to Ireland? Because you're obviously a hugely important trading partner.
Well, we are a hugely important trading partner. People often lose sight of that. I was in London yesterday, and I know that the Treasury made some comment, I think, to the Standard. I haven't seen that particular report, so it would be unwise to speculate as to what that means.
Would you welcome it? Is it something you'd be interested in, a loan from Britain?
There were reports, I think, in British newspapers over the last few days that put big figures on what an arrangement with Ireland would cost in British terms. So I'm not sure what the details are there. But I think the major focus now must be within the Eurozone. We have to work together. No matter what we might feel about whether this is just or unjust, we have to sit down with our partners. And it's dialogue between our partners that will work this thing through. Because basically we have done everything that was requested of us. Everybody accepts there has been complete support for the programmes that we've put in place, but we do have this specific final step to take.
Is part of it, you are implementing these extremely tough measures which are causing real pain to ordinary people in Ireland. It means the government is not very popular. You've got a by-election, you've got political instability too. I mean, you've got the possibility that the government itself will not have a majority, will not be able to actually continue much longer beyond the 25th of November when the Donegal by-election takes place.
Well, I would have to say that, you know, if Irish people looking at this, they must be aware that if we were to heap further instability into this situation, political instability into this situation, we'd be doing ourselves no favours.
So they should vote for you? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you're acting rationally and you want to create stability, what you should do is vote Fianna Fáil. But I'm not supposed to say that. It's an outrageous thing to say in your channel. But I get you in trouble. But no, basically the function, what really has to be done now is I think the parameters will have to be worked out very, very quickly. Because what we need to do is we need to show action. We have as you know, we have a European Council meeting coming up on the 16th of December. I think that the markets will be very, very unsettled until that stage. And what we are committed to resolving our own domestic issues, and we will work with our European partners to help to support and to strengthen the Eurozone.
Okay.
That's where our future lies.
Mr. Rush, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Gavin.